Pleased to present module CCS06 for an introduction to the Contamination Control Strategy creation process. This session will discuss Contamination Control Strategy creation. Some of the objectives for this session. So we're going to look at some of the critical considerations of the Contamination Control Strategy. We will address some of the contamination sources. We will look at the elements that make up the Contamination Control Strategy. We will look at a simple Contamination Control Strategy implementation plan that aligns with the plan, do, check, act process. When developing a contamination control strategy, there are four main areas to consider, which are microbial load, i.e. what is the inherent load on raw materials and consumables that can bring contamination into the process. Microbial ingress, i.e. what are the sources of contamination and how are they gaining access to the manufacturing environment. Proliferation, i.e. are there environmental factors or processing conditions that may increase the risk or extent of contamination. And inactivation, i.e. are the cleaning, sterilisation and monitoring programs appropriate to ensure bioburden is being eliminated or kept in check. Sources of contamination. So we will look at viable and non-viable sources, so focus on microbial and cellular debris, e.g. pyrogens and endotoxins, as well as particulates, for example glass and other visible and subvisible particles. You can look at microbial contamination. These are the risks introduced through inappropriate materials, facility, utilities, equipment, methods, cleaning or sterilisation. We look at the risks of cross-contamination. So these are the risks introduced through cross-contamination between different materials and products due to inadequate facility, cleaning or control measures, and personnel-induced risks, which are introduced through personnel, including inadequate training, gouging, and hygiene practices. Medicinal manufacturing, safeguarding the product from contamination is key. The Contamination Control Strategy is a critical tool for this. It establishes measures to ensure product protection and it's central to Annex 1. The new update to Annex 1 is driving a more holistic contamination control strategy approach. There are key elements of a contamination control strategy taken from PDA TR 90, the Contamination Control Strategy Development in Pharmaceutical Manufacturing. Looking at the diagram on the right, you can see that there are different elements that make up the contamination control strategy. Starting at the bottom of the diagram, we can see that there are some foundational elements which are quality culture, quality risk management, and robust scientific knowledge of the process. Moving up from that, we have contamination control, where you assess all the potential sources of contamination across your personnel, your process, your vendors and materials, your equipment, and your facility. Sitting on top of that is the validation of controls, and validation proves that all facility, utility, and process activities are under control. Sitting on top of that is the monitoring of control, where we have a monitoring system in place to identify any potential contaminants across the different elements like personnel monitoring, in-process monitoring, material monitoring, environmental monitoring, utility monitoring, and pest control procedures. And governance is a key and essential element to ensure that proper management oversight is applied to the contamination control process. The contamination control strategy implementation process can be broken into 4 stages, which mimic the plan, do, check, act process that people are familiar with. Stage 1 or plan is where you define the CCS approach. This is where you define your team, you look at your CCS framework, you decide if you're testing your requirements explicitly or implicitly, and deciding on the CCS format. In stage 2 is the do part. It's where you compile your CCS document. It's where you generate your document, your process maps, your facility map, you perform your gap analysis, your microbial control FMEA, you prioritize your risks, and you approve your document. In stage 3 is check. It's where you evaluate the effectiveness of the CCS. So this is where monitoring, trending, evaluating, and governance come into play. And stage 4 is ACT, is where you continuously improve the CCS. So based on findings, you'll implement new CAPAs, you'll monitor new technology, you'll use regulatory intelligence, and perform CapEx investments. Thank you for watching this introduction to this module. If you'd like to watch the remainder and get 25% off our Contamination Control Fundamental Program, head over to our website at pharmalliance.ie/training-programs and use code YT25OFF. Please do it now as spaces are limited and it's expiring soon. For your time, and we'll see you on the next module.